Today's lecture is pre-recorded because I'm out of town. I'm at the Autocon, and yeah, therefore I record these slides. If you have any questions, please ask in the Teams, or as soon as I'm back in Switzerland, we can have some talks, conversations about the topic. It's quite an important topic. We have heard many times already the term of single source of truth. Not everyone understands the same thing, but yeah, in this lecture I want to give an overview of all the topics I believe are important that we have in mind when we're talking about single source of truth. So what is actually single source of truth? Yeah, there's a lot of debates if the term is correct or not. There are most likely there cannot be one single source of truth. Many people say the operational single source of truth is the network device itself, so the data we have from the network. In my perspective, if we're talking about network automation, what we want to have is a declarative way to describe how our infrastructure should look like. And if we, for example, then take a glance at Kubernetes, how it does it, it has this reconciliation loop who always take care that the desired state is the provision state. In network automation, sadly, we are not there yet. Also, sometimes you don't want to make changes on the fly without knowing that there are changes. But what I really think we need to work through is that we get to this point where we have a possible way, in a programmatic way, if it's somehow possible, that we can say at any moment I know how my network needs to look like. I don't want to talk here about digital twins and all this hype topics as well, but yeah, we were used to in the past to work with Excel sheets. For me, even if we would have only one version of an Excel sheet or one location, let's say in Git, and we version it, and we then with Python, with pandas or another library can access this would be already good. Many cases I have seen is that multiple engineers have multiple Excel versions with data there. They have notepads with comments, and if you ask them what is configured on this device, which services are running, they in the end need to log in and to take a look. And especially if you want to automate the network and you also want to be able to remove configuration again, single source of truth is one of the crucial things. And it is definitely not easy to build your own data model and to have all the data you need for the automation, but not in a redundant way and in a way that you can really maintain it there. Yeah, it's a big topic. We don't have time for going into all these details in 45 minutes, sadly, but yeah, the goal is to give you an overview. So there are many solutions out there. I have here some of the open source solutions, as we are focusing more on the open source, but there is also a lot of vendor or kind of pricey solutions out there, definitely. And we have to see what are our needs. So before we choose a tool, maybe we should think about how we want to use the tool, what issues we have, what issues should it solve us. And one important topic is who will in the end use this tool. Will it be us as an engineer? Will it be a customer using a self-service portal? And will it be the operations? Or yeah, how will people, engineers, operators work with this tool? Depending, can we go with YAML files in Git, or do we need to have role-based access control in our tool and have beautiful masks, forms, and validation, for example? Validation anyway is key, but yeah, so keep in mind who will use it and how will they use it. There is nothing worse than a single source of truth who is not the truth. and people are not using it, bypassing it, or yeah, finding ways around the solution. One of the big players definitely is NetBox. NetBox was founded by DigitalOcean, I believe. Yeah, DigitalOcean must be. Yeah, it's open source Django application with database behind where we can model or put all our infrastructure data there. Another solution is, or maybe I have to say was, the network source of truth. It was coming from Dropbox, but last time I checked, the last Git commit is 5 years ago, so not really maintained anyway. But it's, yeah, sometimes we still read this name. It's still here. You can still adapt it if you want to really use this approach. Yeah. Then we have just simple Git. So what here I want to say is that many places, like you had in the labs, we can just store our inventory. If we use a simple inventory, for example, in the Git repository, we can versionize, we can make pull requests. If we are our own users, that works pretty well, depending what kind of inventory plugins, what kind of files we use. It also scales not so bad, but still, yeah, if we then go to 10,000 or 50,000 of devices and a lot of information, this can get maybe a little big. So we also have to think about how big is our infrastructure. Then there is this, yeah, not really tool. There was this bachelor thesis, I think it was, about there is not only one single source of truth most of the time. So the idea of this Kraken was that we can define hierarchical ways that which information comes from which source and overrides the information, also generates reports which one are not matching. So for example, if we have a device management database, this is most likely the source for the device serial number, but maybe the version we are running on, the network operation version, is more up to date in another system where we use automation, and therefore we then can say, hey, we merged this was information from this system was prioritized, but you have technical debt in this database and you should change it. That was the idea, to generate this kind of reports. Many companies, they have, for example, already existing IP address management tools. They now need another tool for something, and many of these tools here, they can do multiple things. So we sometimes have multiple information at multiple places, and this is, yeah, hard to track, and we need to know which information is coming from which system and which has priority. And the newest of all the tools, it was released for public beta 2 days ago, is Infrahub from OpsMill. They combined source of truth approach with versioning control. Maybe one tool I did not mention, NetBox. There was a fork some years ago by Network to Code, and it's notable. It's similar to NetBox, but it has, I would say, more plugins focusing on also configuring devices. So NetBox itself, the idea behind was always to be a tool to store information, but not to be an automation tool to go directly to devices and change stuff. There were some plugins, or there are some plugins where we can get running configuration and all this stuff, but yeah, the focus was always on storing data, where NetBox also has some features where we can deploy configuration directly to the applications. All this we can of course then combine, for example, with workflow engine. Now NetBox, NetBox, they have integrations with webhooks where we can trigger workflows. All the nice things. They are all just tools. In the end, what we need to know is what is our need, what do we use this data for, and how do we make sure that this data are always up to date. So a single source of truth has to be up to date, and in my opinion, this should be the place where we make changes in a declarative way, and afterwards it is automatically pushed to the devices, for example. So for learning objectives, because we have to have some questions like the exams, but they will be easy, don't worry. We want to know a little bit the difference between the tools, so just an overview. Question could be which of these tools uses the graph database, and then hopefully you know the answer. Some stuff like this. Yeah, I will not go into vendor tools, so don't worry. It will be these tools we have seen in the agenda here. And of course, I really hope that you will understand the importance of a single source of truth or multiple point of source of truth, of a declarative source of truth. There are so many different ways to say these words. It's all kind of marketing, and in the end, yeah, we stick with the single source of truth because it's kind of used a lot. On the other side, I'm happy to talk about a declarative description of our network. So NetBox, you will also find all the information on the link in the documentation. It started by DigitalOcean, as I mentioned, and the key components at the beginning, at least, it was IP address management. We can model equipment regs. So we see that also this tool came from the data center perspective, where we have a lot of racks with equipment, but it also really works well for others networks. We have devices, of course, where we can have all the device informations. We can put connections there, so there is even the possibility to have cabling documentation with patch panels, where you can really say from this server, this port goes to this patch panel goes to this distribution center. From this distribution center we go to the network port on the device X. And yeah, you can also track virtual machines. Definitely not the main focus in my opinion, but yeah, data circuits. I will make a demo later, yeah, so that you have a feeling how NetBox looks like. But in here, yeah, it's a Django application. It has all these predefined components. If you need anything, you can extend it with plugins. We had a couple of bachelor student theses who were going in this direction, creating plugins for adding information like the MPLS deployment you have done in the lab, where we had YAML files. All the information we could definitely store in NetBox and then collect it. There are inventory plugins for Ansible non-near, so we directly can use the API. The API is documented. We have normal API, let's say REST API, and we have GraphQL, and therefore, yeah, it's a nice tool. It really took up. It's now even a company behind called NetBox Lab, who offers it as a software as a service as well in the cloud. But still it's open source, and you can deploy it in your lab or on your on-premise for free. I will not go into detail in this network source of truth because, yeah, in my opinion, it's kind of not maintained well anymore. The idea was simple. We had some really simple resource types, and then everything we had to model with attributes. So we had to define a device has an attribute called name, and it has to be a string, and all the stuff for these devices could then be added. We also could have networks. Was a nice idea. It was extendable. It in the end is just a database. I think it was Postgres in the they used, but yeah, if you are interested in, take a look. Maybe it also helps you to compare the things. It was really API focused, so there is not a huge beautiful GUI if you're looking for that. There you would have to make your own GUI, but yeah, take a look by yourself. But did not really take off. So, and now what you have seen already, and sometimes it's called GitOps, sometimes it's not. Yeah, if you really look at the definition of the Open GitOps working group from Cloud Foundation, this is not directly GitOps, but yeah, what we have done in the past in the labs and what is a common approach is to have your stuff in the GitLab, right? One thing you definitely don't want to have in your GitLab, it's secrets. In the whole lecture now I will exclude this secret topic as it is a topic for its own. It's yeah, we normally need a vault system where we can store these secrets safely. What we have done in the lab now with the CI/CD, we stored it as a protected masked environment variable, and therefore yeah, using GitLab to hopefully take care of our secrets, and so we don't have to store them in a YAML file. The idea is with Git that, yeah, as you have seen, we can define our own YAML files. It could also be a TOML, it could be also a CSV, it could be JSON. It just, yeah, the idea is that we have the Git flow features where we can make branches, where we can make pull requests, we have versioning, and at any time we can go back and say, I want to have the desired state from last Friday. That can be really handy, definitely, but especially if we are communicating with third parties like the security vault, this can be tricky and bringing in a lot of issues with it. And at scale also we have to be aware that we are kind of YAML engineers then in the end and had to deal with a lot of files, especially if the user group who will update our declarative single source of truth is more UI preferred. Then we maybe have to see how we can deal with this. Another nice thing on the other side is that if we have also templates with Changer, we can also version it in the Git, so we have the same tooling. So yeah, there are pros, there are cons. In the end, you have to start with one solution and maybe you have to migrate to another solution. If you are visiting the cloud operations module, you will also hear a lot about GitOps, where we then have tools and take care that our desired state in our repository is deployed on the Kubernetes cluster. Similar things we also want to have in the network, my opinion. And yeah, this internal project is Kraken. It will not be topic of the exam directly because it's just an internal project on the eprints.ast.ch. You will find information about it. It's basically, as I said, a way that you can define which information has to be pulled from which single source of truth, because many places we don't have one single source of truth. The key message I believe is here that we really need to know which information do we store where and how do we sync this information with other systems. Like, is this information coming from IP address management or is it coming from our Git repository? And what is if I have a mismatch? And if you have the same information stored in multiple systems, there I can certainly say there will be times where you have mismatches. Of course, ideally you would populating this information automate, but as soon as people also have access to the data and can change it, especially in big companies, it's taking not a lot of time until you have mismatch of information, and this really can make your automation journey hard again. My approach would be to take all the permissions from all the users away, and they have to use the automation away. But yeah, that's sadly not gonna work in big corporates. They always need to have access and a way to change data, so be flexible. Yeah, so we also have to be aware that we need to be validating and making reports if this data is still up to date, if the sync process still works, if we, for example, there are Python tools called diff sync from network to code, where we can sync multiple systems with each other. We can also make our own scripts, our own logic, our own workflows, but we need to validate if they're still working. And as soon as we have a, let's say, single source of truth, information drift, so that there is a mismatch, we have to make a ticket and we have to resolve this. That's definitely not an easy challenge, but that's more say mindset change we have to also bring to the network teams. And now, as I mentioned, the newest tool. I'm really excited about the tool because I think it really tackles a lot of issues we are having, and it combines approaches. So it was released 2 days ago. Yes, 2 days ago. And it combines the whole Git flow approach with the traditional single source of truth tools. So it is open source. You can find everything on GitHub, and I will also make a demo so you can have a look at the feel. It's, how can I say, it is in the end a graph database behind, where we have all the information stored. We can define our own schema. So in this solution we defined, for example, in a YAML file or in a Git repository, how our schema has to look, and then in the UI, nice looking UI, we can populate the information. They have a lot of small tiny features with a lot of thoughts behind it that will make your life easier, but probably you don't know yet that you will need this. One of the newest features is resource pools, resource management, where we can define different pools like IP addresses, but also numbers for BGP IS numbers for VLANs, and yeah, then you can just operate with it like give me the next IP. And the biggest, or one of the biggest key points for me, is the branching. So we can, if we want to make a change, in traditional tools, if we create a device, this device is created. But that does not mean that we already have this device in place, or maybe we are just planning. And of course, then there is the possibility to have attributes, say, yeah, this device is planned, but still it's, with the API, we make one operations after the other. And what Infrahub can do with branching is that we can create a new branch, we can create our data there, we can even update the model, we can make changes, and if we are finished with the changes, with the preparation, we then can merge it. They have pipelines, they also run tests, validation, and yeah, we can merge it into the production, for example. This sounds already amazing in my opinion, but if we now take a closer look, we can see that we can combine this with a Git repository and make the branch on both sides at the same time. Then we can also update the templates, because many times if we update, for example, the schema, or we add a new service, we also need to update our templates, right? Maybe some schema changes really will break our old templates, and with this I can then make the pull request on the same side at the same time. It's not called pull request in Infrahub, but you get the idea. And yeah, then we have this nice Git flow operation possibilities in our traditional tool with a UI. It's still better. There will be some bugs, I'm sure that of, but it's amazing how much work they have put in and how many thoughts they have put in this solution. And yeah, I think this really can make a difference in our daily life in the end. And I'm planning to also go a little deeper into it, making some use cases. For example, I really want to have a showcase showing how we can make GitOps finally possible, with all the 4 key principles of Open GitOps. That's something that's on my to-do list, but somehow my days are then just too short normally. So, because this is a recorded session, it's now a little bit hard to have interactive questions, but I'm happy to discuss with you next Friday. If you have any questions, then please send me them in Teams. We could also make a call if you have some questions. Take a look at the labs you have solved, like the MPLS layer 3, the provisioning and deprovisioning, how there is the declarative single source of truth in the Git repository directly. How would it be if it would be in one of these tools I mentioned now? And also now the CI/CD lab, where we have the non-near simple inventory directly in the Git repository. How would it be? How would the workflow change for you if this would be in one of these tools? And yeah, I will then now try to make some demos. So if you wanna try out NetBox, there is an online public demo, so you can go to demo.netbox.dev and you can log in with admin top security credentials. No, it's just a public lab, so you will find out that the dashboard is customizable. But then, for example, if we go to devices, we can here define device types. In this case here, we have, for example, Cisco Catalyst Layer 2 access switch with this model number. We can have multiple instances of it, and yeah, then we can have manufacturers, of course. We can also then have Cisco here. We can also store some information additionally, and then we can have the devices, and we can of course also add new devices, fill out the form, and yeah, so we can here define everything. Most likely you want to use the API to create all your infrastructure, yeah, especially if you're starting from a point, because otherwise you need an intern who can really create all the devices. We have device roles we can define. Let's say you have a role access switch, and this role then also can be attached to the device. We can have change log, so we have some history. We see what is happening in this demo environment. Of course, it's not happening a lot. We have interfaces, so we can model all the interfaces. They belong to a device, of course, and yeah, we can look for it. We have here in this demo we have 1587 interfaces, for example. You can then also divide them in front ports, rear ports. So front ports, we can have console ports. Maybe we can have power ports, so we can model which PDU is connected with which power supply. All this stuff. It's quite impressive how many fields there are, and if there is something missing, maybe I can show you on the devices itself. Let's open just a random access switch, for example. we in here can see interfaces. We can, if we model it correctly, we can also see the rack positioning. It is now on unit 10 in this rack. Yeah, so nice little details, and if someone has to work with it and the system is up to date, it's really handy. But of course, it needs to be up to date, it needs to be maintained, and the best way is if you really use this data for the automation, because then it needs to be up to date. We can power ports, so you can see here what type of cable we are using and the connections, how it is connected. We have config context, so here we can add variables. For example, when we want to have some custom variables, we can put them in the context, and then if the API, we can collect it, we can render configuration templates and use it. We can also have some render config here. I don't know all the features because yeah, NetBox is quite fast developing. It has some nice features definitely. We can also add this here. We can, for example, customize this links, so we have a link directly for a monitoring system or something. It's highly customizable, I would say. Yeah, so connections, you can see the cables, interface connections. You can just say, this is single mode. You can open this. You can see from which location it goes, which circuit, which provider it is, if it's a provider. Yeah, wireless. We can also hide some of these points if we don't need it. One big point is IP address management, so I can have, for example, aggregates. Then I have, for example, the RFC 1918, the private IP addresses, and then I can use them in the prefixes. And I can also then have IP ranges. And with the API, I can, for example, then say, give me the next IP address or something like this. If you remember the MPLS use case where we had to add YAML files to say which VRF is on which side, here we will have, for example, the type VRF, and we can generate, or we can define them here, let's say VRF alpha. And we can already say the route distinguisher. Yeah, we can also edit it, of course. We can have import targets, export targets. So this is pretty much what you had in the service YAML file in the repository. All this kind of information. We have different type of objects we can model here. We also have VPNs, mainly layer 2 at the moment. There are some ideas for layer 3 MPLS VPN. There is a plugin from 2 former colleagues, students of you. Yeah, so if something is missing, you can write a plugin, right? As I mentioned, the power we can provision, and of course we have operations, webhooks, for example. We can have also kind of reporting jobs. We can execute scripts to make reports, compliance checks, all this stuff. It's pretty easy. And for everything that is not really covered yet for us, but there are objects, there is this here, customization. So we can also create custom fields. So here we have a custom ID for a tenant, but let's say we make a new one. And we want to say it's for the object type, let's say VRF, right? And then let's say we just call it NetAut. Let's type text. Now, say it's a boolean, just for fun. Will not read all of this here, but yeah, default. Let's try to put it on false. It's a long time I use this because, yeah, we had this at the institute for managing the infrastructure. At the moment, I'm not really having NetBox in a productive environment, so I'm not up to date with all the features. But if we create this one, and now if we go to VPN, if I did everything correct, not VPN, IP address management, we go to VRF. There should now be, if we edit alpha again, we have a custom field and the value is now on the false. So we can add custom fields for additional stuff. The other thing that we have to keep in mind, if we have a huge environment with 50,000 of devices and each device has interfaces, if we make a lot of custom fields, this could impact our performance of the, but then we have to, yeah, we have to just keep in mind that we should be careful with what kind of custom fields we are creating. So maybe sometimes it's easier to use the configuration context, and yeah, depending on our use case. But of course we have GraphQL API, we have a Slack community here, we have the REST API documentation, we can also have VLANs, yeah, all sorts of things. And if we need something else, we have to write a plugin. Everything of these fields are directly in the Postgres database handled. Yeah, that's a really quick overview to give you an idea how this works. Of course, we have the organization stuff where we can have sites, regions, tenants, contacts. We can also have contacts for services with phone numbers or with tech cases. Yeah, contracts. So this is the demo about NetBox. I highly recommend to play around to see how you find your stuff, and all this is then accessible over the API. Infrahub, it's really new. You will find the documentation. I highly recommend to go through the getting started to get an overview. The easiest, definitely, if you want to spin up your own instances, and they also provide some demo environments, would be the GitHub code spaces. As a student, I think you have some free credits there that you can spin up code spaces if you have the student's account for GitHub. Yeah, so I deployed it on the infrastructure, on the LTB actually, and yeah, so we go to Infrahub. When it's running, we have Python SDK directly linked with Nonia plugin. As you know, I'm a fan of Nonia. And we have also some documentation insights, for example, the integration with Git. On the left side, we now see here, for example, we have access interface. It's loading the moment. The server is not the fastest I'm running on it. I'm also not sure if the VPN is still up. But yeah, the thing is, this here is auto-generated from the schema we upload. So what I did already after updating, we have with this command here, infrahub ctl schema load. I loaded the schema into the main branch, you see here, but we could also with -- branch load it in another branch to see how this looks. This is a simple schema file. We can have some generic data type like interface, and from this interface we, for example, have a name, we have a description, we have a drop box where I can say a drop down. Sorry, don't have it's active, planned, obsolete, drained, for example, and we can have relationships that a device has interfaces, of course, and we can have devices with the same thing. I was here playing around a little to get a feeling. Definitely not an expert, so watching the tutorials from OpsMill I would definitely recommend. I just want to give you a short overview how this looks at the moment and how I feel about it. Then I can have now inheritance with backbone interfaces, for example in my case inherit from the network interface. The network part is the namespace, so we see here namespace, network, and then we see interface. So this is a relation to the namespace network to the object interface. That's in the beginning important to know, but if you first follow the getting started and don't get into it directly and think you can figure out everything by your own, you will save 5 minutes. Yeah, we have devices, backbone, we have access interfaces where we then also have some attributes, access networks, for example. I say we have name VLAN network. It is related to a network domain. A network domain is also then here, for example. So yeah, we can build our own. You have to try it out. I'm not saying that this one is the perfect one, definitely not. Also in the Git repo there are a couple of examples, bigger ones. I here we're just focusing on the CI/CD use case where we have backbone interfaces and access interfaces. Yeah, so this is one way to do it. Let me just see. I updated it 5 minutes before. Maybe that was not the best idea because I'm now on the develop branch and not on the stable version, but yeah. Branching artifacts, really nice that we can generate artifacts. We have generators where we can say we have Jinja or Python code, and with this we can generate, for example, for each device already templates. If I define the template and I use the API, I can get the running configuration, for example, or the template snippet rendered for this device. So it also helps me if I want to render device information, and I can use Jinja as mentioned, or I can use Python code, and then for example I generate the Yang data I would send to the native model, to the open config model, or to the standard ETF models. So yeah, there is a lot of flexibility, and we have GraphQL. I highly recommend to go to the sandbox and have the visual editor if you're working with GraphQL the first time. Yeah, so network domain we can now, and this is generated from the schema. So with defining the schema, it is possible to generate all the stuff, and we can also hide things. We have seen the icons we can use to make it nice. Let's say here Rappelswil, and this is my location number 1. That's stuff I defined. If it makes sense or not, that is really up to me at the moment for my use case. So I have a device. Let's say device would be here switch 01. Let's say you are my description or core. You can add it to a site. I have no site yet. So let's say I need a site Rappelswil as well. So maybe it was not the best idea to call the network domain Rappelswil. But now I have Rappelswil as well. I can create the switch, and I can also then create a loopback. So my switch none needs to have a loopback. At the moment, how I did it is hard coded. So this is loopback 0. let's call them description management, and we will say this is active. And of course we need to have a device. We have the device here now, and I can create over GraphQL. I can now get all the interfaces from one site or from one device or one device type easily. That's really flexible, but you have to get used to the GraphQL, of course. And I also see here the device, because of the relationship here I already see this loopback interface with this IP address is on this device, but I can also go to the device. If I go to the devices, I see now here there's an interface. Yeah, pretty neat information. So if I go to site again, yeah, that's the issue if I deploy it on my own smaller server. Maybe the last time I used it was much faster. But yeah, now it is here. So what we see here is this information. So here we can also define some method information. So that's, in my opinion, especially handy if we have information who is coming from external source. We can define which source it is, who is the owner, is it protected or not, so can I change it or not. I can also add more metadata, and this, in my opinion, is also one really nice feature that I can say I have my device maybe, and in the device, if I use the serial number, I can say this is really coming from another system, and it's synchronized, and here I can then mark it directly. One other thing I have seen, I have used my own IP address hard-coded out of my head for the device. New feature is, but I'm not sure if I have it on this here. A feature who is coming soon to the demo is, or maybe did not check out the right version, is resource management, where I can have a pool of IP addresses, and then I can say give me the next loopback. This kind of automation is also now possible. I have seen it yesterday at the booth, and yeah, we can have backbone interfaces. We can create a backbone interface here because it's IPv6 link locally in our lab. We don't need any IP addresses. We can just say which interfaces are having this information, and in the automation we can then populate this from the API. This was a really short demo because I should be at breakfast since 1 minute. Yeah, I'm hopefully have time to make maybe some more videos. Next time we can maybe also have a live demo again. If you have questions, please let me know. And yeah, therefore I wish you a good week, and next week I will be back in Rapperswil in person. Thank you very much.